Hi, can I read you guys what I wrote this week? It's called Healthcare is a Human Right. So is Dissent. Now, just a quick disclaimer, this piece is my own personal experience entwined with political commentary. It is my restrained yet still unabashed take on recent events, how power is enforced, how symbols are crafted, and how justice is for sale. I am not glorifying anything except the truth, resistance, and our right to question what is happening before our very eyes. If you find that to be more problematic than the everyday quiet violence that has become the status quo, then perhaps you need to listen to this most of all. I believe in due process, free speech, and most of all, calling out bullshit when I see it. This piece is not attempting to justify violence. It is questioning why some violence is treated as tragedy and other violence as business as usual. Everything that I wrote here is protected under the First Amendment, no matter what some bought billionaire or bureaucrat has to say about that. 2020 was an illuminating year for all of us. Personally, I experienced many tumultuous mental and physical health crises that completely shifted my mentality about almost everything that I had previously crafted my identity on. In turn, I started to share personal anecdotes surrounding my health struggles with my followers in a series called My Skin Diary. After the return of my cystic acne and an awful bout of gastrointestinal issues caused by a medication I was prescribed for my skin, I began to post about how awful I felt daily. I shared with my then much larger audience about how I had struggled with cystic acne since the age of 13, when I had first actually been prescribed Accutane. Also known as isotretinoin, this is a very harsh medication prescribed to those with different skin conditions, like cystic acne, for example. From the age of 13 to 20, I was prescribed Accutane on 8 different occasions, each time for a year. While taking it, you must get blood work done every month, as there can be awful side effects. Always be on birth control and be able to pass a negative pregnancy test at the time of your refill, and also pass a multiple choice exam where you're asked questions about sex, and you have to solve every single one by saying you'll choose to stay celibate. That's the only right answer to every single question. Not only was this like a monthly humiliation and torture ritual for me, but something more sinister was happening. Without my noticing, even the common yet still painful side effects of skin peeling and nosebleeds became my casual daily sacrifices to escape people's gasps of horror at my acne-covered skin. After doing this every single month for 8 years to get my medication and have clear skin, I was absolutely gutted. I had tried almost everything else on the market. I had tried every diet, every plan, every topical medication there was to try. After every year round of Accutane, when my acne came back like clockwork, the dermatologists would just put me back on it without another thought, reassuring me that maybe I just needed one more round. They reassured me that when I became an adult, the hormones would regulate and the problem, it would just fix itself. But when it didn't, and it actually came back in full swing despite my adulthood, I faced a really important challenge. I had to realize that these constant ups and downs of feeling so powerful with clear skin and like a monster without it had consumed me for far too long. The high school girl that would wake up at 6 o'clock sharp to cake foundation and powder on before class was beginning to believe that being reliant on this medication to feel beautiful, acceptable, and palatable enough in society was absolutely obliterating my mental health. When I turned 21 and the dermatologist wanted to prescribe me Accutane again, I decided to give a last shot to another medication instead, called doxycycline. I didn't know that it would leave me bedridden and about 50 pounds lighter than normal. I became a shell of the person I was in just a few months. I was always shaky and lethargic, yet pent up with anxiety. I had to smoke weed every morning just to muster up the strength to get out of bed. Anything that I ate or drank would end up vomited back up just moments later. They tried to tell me that these things could be normal, and that I just had to wait it out. I knew that there was nothing normal about what was happening to me. I was not functioning in my everyday life anymore. So I ghosted them and I got off the medication completely. After doing my research, I found tretinoin, a topical retinoid that I had never once been offered before. And upon my move back to my hometown to heal and regain some healthy weight, I went to my primary care physician and asked if I could have a prescription for it. Immediately, it cleared my skin. And after an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, my gastroenterologist gave me strong acid reflux pills and told me to stay away from doxycycline forever. My weight was thankfully regained and my acne has subsided since then, but I'm not really sure how those 8 long years on Accutane will come back to harm me and how being on birth control since the age of 13 has affected me mentally and physically. Every American has a story like this or knows someone who does. My experience is a very tame and non-lethal example compared to others' stories. No matter who you are, most of us are closer to being one bad week away from being unhoused than we are to becoming billionaires. And that one bad week could even be one bad day if you have a particularly expensive hospital trip. As an American who has lived in both Europe and Asia, healthcare is often one of the most glaring differences between our society and the others that I have experienced. In Seoul, I was always blown away by how streamlined and easy it was to receive any sort of medical attention. Whether you are seeking life-saving care or help for something considered to be more cosmetic, it was always made accessible and not just for Korean citizens. Even when I didn't have insurance and I got sick or needed an endoscopy, it was so affordable. And perhaps it's all just a matter of perspective, sure, as they would normally wince when they were about to read me the total and say, it's a bit expensive. I'm sure times have changed slightly since I lived there, but it would normally be something like 20,000 won, which is like $14 for a month's worth of pills, or about 200,000 won or $141 for an endoscopy at Yonsei's award-winning hospital, anesthesia included. I never felt like I could not afford to get the help that I needed, even if I was not covered by insurance. The doctors there were caring, efficient, and extremely professional. On the other hand, public health systems are not always the best. The UK's NHS, for example, has its issues with extreme staff shortages and immense wait times for life-saving care. Regardless of issues, which I believe could be fixed with some more funding or infrastructure to train doctors to meet the overwhelming amount of people needing care, I do believe that healthcare is a human right, and it should be provided to us as such. The American healthcare system is a laughingstock to everyone but us. We cannot allow for profit to be prioritized over health in the way that we currently do. Without our health, what do we have? This idea of universal healthcare might seem pretty obvious and easy to get on board for many of us, but when I shared my health struggles online, I received a lot of mixed emotions from my audience. I could tell that many of the negative comments that I received were just projections from those unhealed who still bear the trauma endured through their own acne struggles or weight fluctuations. On one hand, I had never been more celebrated for how skinny I was by my peers and online, yet I felt like I was gonna fall over and die at any moment. On the other hand, I was called cursed and disgusting for refusing to cover up my cystic acne anymore, but also was somehow receiving the most clicks, opportunities, and attention of my whole online career. People could either relate and were excited about the representation, or try to suppress me and do mental acrobatics to find a way to make my struggles my own fault. I see these two camps of thought in many of our current platitudes, healthcare aside. I think there's people who will say, hey, this isn't right. I want to yell about this and get it out there in the open and then maybe do something to change it and make it fairer for everyone. And then there's people that will say, well, hey now, it's been this way forever. I've had to do this for decades. And now you want to go and change it just because you're overdoing what I've been forced to do forever. That's not fair. And that's not how things worked for me. And that's not how they're going to work for you. Societal pressure and indoctrination often make us perpetrators of our own trauma. The everyday violence that these systems normalize keep us so pained, so fearful, that we want to inflict the same pain on others. No one came to help you when you were struggling to pay your health insurance premium, so why would you help them or allow them to get off scot-free? I believe that this form of punishing younger generations, especially those that will feel the effects of allowing healthcare, education, and energy to prioritize profit over the people and the climate, is a form of masochistic self-harm. I think many are angry that they let themselves be fucked over by systems for so long. It's not too late to fight for something right. Maybe it's not going to outrightly help you, but the impact your choices will make will go on to help so many. You cannot go back to the past. Change will always be synonymous with humankind, and trying to delay this process is futile. Even when Elvis came out, shaking his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show, the elder and more conservative audience members watching were mortified by his dancing. He was actually signed on for 3 special performances, 2 of which were filmed from head to toe and met with an uproar of outrage or delight from his fans. An infamous Democratic senator and well-known segregationist, James Eastland, even publicly called for him to be suppressed. Though the last performance may have been broadcasted from the hips up, Senator Eastland could not stop progress no matter how hard he tried. And boy did he. I think if you brought a City Girl CD to the Ed Sullivan Show, they would have had you tried as a witch and burned immediately. But, things go on. And I'm blessed to be able to listen to Megan Thee Stallion today. I genuinely thought that everyone learned that the past is better left in the past when they read The Great Gatsby in middle or high school. History repeats itself. The lesson will be relearned. The past cannot be resurrected no matter how hard you try. I do believe that we will one day make progress in the right direction with healthcare and the climate. I have to hope and believe. Last December, something shifted slightly surrounding public discourse on healthcare. Someone was caught on CCTV in Midtown Manhattan after having allegedly shot Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare. Most of us did not know Brian Thompson before this day, but soon enough, it was revealed that UHC was not only under investigation for implementing AI to reject 90% of claims, making UHC the top denier of claims. The DOJ had also named Brian Thompson in a lawsuit for insider trading. All of these things that I mention are cited on my Substack article if you're curious and want to follow up on any of the links. Due to these cases, the police had initially reported that it looked like the work of a professional, perhaps alluding to it being an inside job or that of a highly skilled or even paid assassin. For a week after, the NYPD mobilized like we had never seen before, bringing out all the resources they could to track down the person many online began to call the adjuster. On December 9th, the individual, who I will be referring to as LM from here on out, was arrested in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The media circus that ensued was like nothing I had ever seen in my life before, as people picked apart LM's social media accounts for any crumb of information that could put together the pieces. To many, it didn't seem likely that someone like him, who seemed to have it all on paper, valedictorian, rich, good-looking, would have allegedly been able to commit this crime. Attempting to fit him into the image of someone who could be the perpetrator of this crime sent many people into a spiral. Apparently, the police and UHC were also concerned about the reaction that ensued. UHC has allegedly issued DMCAs to people using the alleged shooter's CCTV image for stickers without any mention of the company or even the alleged crime included. In a memo, police instructed media outlets to stop posting LM's image, instead opting for one with what one can only assume is soiled pants in a police interrogation room. I began really following the case the day that he had an outburst outside the Pennsylvania courthouse. According to a court filing by LM's Pennsylvania attorney Thomas Dickey, after the police failed to read LM his Miranda rights at McDonald's, he did not know if he would even have representation in court. Exasperated, he yelled to anyone who could hear, "Your coverage of this event has been completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." I talked passionately about due process in my last piece. What ensued in the past 4 months has been, in my opinion, the most insane disregard for due process and the right to presumption of innocence that I can attest to seeing play out in real time. Many of you will remember the perp walk that happened on December 19th. Perp walks have been around forever and are utilized by the police to parade around the individual they have captured to make them appear guilty to the general public. They also function as a way to pat themselves on the back and say, "Yeah, we did it, everyone," which is exactly what Eric Adams and Jessica Tisch proceeded to do in their subsequent press conference. What stood out most to me about the perp walk was seeing a person born in the same year as me being paraded around like a trophy in the dead of winter without a bulletproof vest on or even just a jacket. As if the perp walk wasn't enough, Adams and Tisch have gone on countless shows and filmed several documentaries about the case, sharing privileged evidence before a federal indictment has even been filed. This is extremely problematic for the defense. Though being given a strict deadline of April 23rd to file any motions, quote, roughly 130 pages of grand jury testimony are being withheld. Roughly 1/4 of the grand jury testimony as of March 26th, 2025. However, the prosecutor's willingness to act outside the boundaries of the code of conduct and instead focus on things like LM's court attire or notes of support found in his socks may come back to bite them as they continue to make extrajudicial statements in attempts to influence the potential jury pool. The perceived woke nature of the alleged crime has thrust LM into becoming a symbol for the fight surrounding healthcare, with his consent or not. He has become the vessel upon which the Trump administration will demonstrate how they intend on claiming, conquering, and quelling anything perceived as dissent or the incitement of it. I actually attended one of LM's first state hearings, the one that happened on December 23rd, 2024. That morning, armed with my heat tech and my hand warmers, I was shocked by how few people had come to line up and spectate. However, it had been extremely cold, information on location and timing extremely scarce, and awareness still spreading. I realized after that day that many also don't know that they have a right to spectate any court hearing they choose to. Media presence around 100 Center Street was already strong when I arrived, and many reporters actually came up to intimidate us into speaking with them, shoving images of LM in our faces and asking if this is why we had come. But not everyone was there to support LM or his right to a fair trial exactly. Many were there because of their experiences as healthcare workers, as people with healthcare, or people just simply interested in politics or law. Chelsea Manning even spoke publicly about why she attended LM's most recent hearing in February. I also linked that in my Substack article if you're interested in hearing her reasons why. No matter who it was that I spoke to or where they came from, we all stood together in a quiet solidarity that day. I found it to be a very meaningful day for me. Seeing LM with shackles around his waist and hands, keeping his hands in place in front of him at all times, was a very sobering experience. The redness around his eyes and the paleness of his skin were a glaring reminder that he is still a human being with indelible rights. Despite the blinding eruption of camera flashes as he walked out of the courtroom, he held his head up high with unwavering strength. Since then, the control he faces at his hearings has been heightened. He is not allowed to be unshackled unless he is to sign something, and cannot even grab a glass to have a drink of water. When his lawyer asked for them to remove his cuffs in court, the judge maintained that, quote, for security reasons and for the security people here, they would prefer him to remain cuffed. Mass murderers, those who often make very explicit their intentions to harm oppressed communities, are hardly ever given this type of treatment in court. Even if you find him to be guilty, surely his treatments, as though he has already been found guilty, should come off as alarming to you. I keep thinking about the Manson family case, especially since that's what headlines really seem to enjoy calling those of us who attended any of LM's hearings. I am purposefully not going to be linking any of these inflammatory articles, but you can go find them easily if you go looking, trust me. I actually was very interested in the Manson family case years ago, and I actually read everything I could find on it. Manson was very good at speaking to the runaway of the 60s. These were children born in a time when communes, open door policies, and free love were the mainstays of society. He was a man of his times, beckoning the lost soul into his community with music and psychedelics. He was also a perpetual criminal, a narcissist, and a master manipulator. As Diane Lake actually put it in her book, Member of the Family, quote, as I discovered that first day in his magic bus, when he focused his attention on you, he made you believe that there was no one else in the world. He also had the uncanny sensibility bestowed upon mystics, yet misused by sociopaths and con men, to know exactly what you needed. Charlie knew what you were afraid of and could paint a scenario that would use all those insights to his advantage, traits that I would see in equal parts over time. Of course, at this moment, as I walked up the bus steps, I saw nothing of these things. Instead, all I saw was acceptance. Manson was incredibly racist and believed that the Beatles song Helter Skelter was a subtle nod of confirmation to this theory that a race war was the only way to heal the world. So, using his charms, Manson indoctrinated a cult of young people to kill at his whim and attempted to blame it on Black people to incite this race war. Manson's trial is an infamous one. His attempts to make a mockery of the courtroom and his crimes in general are extensive. On one occasion, Manson came out with a bloody X etched into his forehead during one of his hearings. On another occasion, the New York Times reported that he, quote, leaped at the judge in the Sharon Tate murder trial today and said, after being subdued, that, quote, someone should cut your head off. Despite the horrific nature of his crimes and what he was actively trying to incite, Manson was not labeled a terrorist or even tried as such. He was found guilty on 7 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and sentenced to death. However, the very next year, the death penalty was actually abolished in the state of California. Many of his family members who committed the crimes directly even eventually made parole and now live freely. Manson lived out his whole life in prison, having been denied parole 12 times, despite having accrued 108 serious disciplinary violations in prison since 1971, until finally passing away in 2017. I believe that the death penalty should be done away with completely, and the prison system completely annihilated and replaced with something that encourages positive change rather than perpetual punishment. But to think Manson wasn't deemed influential or dangerous enough to be tried as a terrorist, and LM allegedly is? When I saw LM, I saw a man being respectful and polite, even to those who paraded him around and yelled out to him like a caged animal. I saw someone who held his tongue, knowing the severity of his situation, despite his rights being actively stripped away from him. And I still see someone who, despite what I assume has massive amounts of discovery to review, takes time to make logs of the letters he receives and tries his best to respond to as many of them as possible. This sort of pressure on any human being would be immense to carry. I'm actually really grateful that the media even made the comparison between LM and Manson's cases. While both are highly publicized, their cases actually highlight a glaring difference between the two. And that's just how politicized LM's case has become. I think that if LM had allegedly targeted minorities, Trump would have called him a nice guy and invited him to hang in his luxury football suite once he was acquitted. Maybe you don't agree. Maybe you think that's crazy. But for Daniel Penny and Kyle Rittenhouse, two alleged vigilante murderers who committed racially targeted attacks, it went pretty much like that. Patrick Crucius, who killed 23 people in a white supremacy-filled rage against Hispanic immigrants, was even recently offered a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. For people of color, lack of due process is unsurprising and commonplace. Those at the BLM protests that I attended were tear gassed and shot at with rubber bullets. Those at 5051 last week were not. Now, I don't want to knock the 5051 protests, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw many express that the crowd seemed to be mostly older and white. I also saw a video of a Gen Z individual on TikTok who spoke about the lack of our generation's presence in the crowd, which is not really shocking if you consider that many of the younger people in this age bracket would consider themselves to be more right-wing or even just apolitical. Perhaps I am wrong and this was not the case at all, but I unfortunately was not there to see for myself. I would also like to briefly mention that 5051's stance on Palestine seems shaky, and the absence of support for Palestine on their platforms is glaring. As of 3 days ago, they did post a video calling for, quote, justice, liberation, and dignity for all people everywhere. However, I hope that as the movement grows, so too will their courage. Making sure that the existence of Palestine and its people is explicitly visible and loudly spoken about is, in my opinion, incredibly important for an organization like theirs to do, especially when the current administration attempts to label the mere representation of Palestine as anti-Semitism or even terrorism. While I want to appreciate those like Cory Booker for his filibuster or other Democrats who went to the protests to speak, their stance on Palestine is always awful. And it's a big reason why many leftist people, me included, were hesitant to cast a vote for Kamala. It's just simply not enough to fight for freedom in any way, shape, or form here, but not everywhere else. We are not free until we are all free. I want to just mention that I was really proud of Hassan Piker's speech. I think he kept it short and sweet enough, and I'm really glad that he continues to use his voice so fearlessly for Palestine. 5051 was just as peaceful as the BLM protests I attended were. And it's people of color peacefully protesting in the streets or demanding justice for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. They are tear gassed, shot at with rubber bullets. Whether it's the peaceful white folks with colorful signs or the violent white folks wielding guns and wearing MAGA hats, they're labeled good people and left to their protests, whether it is peaceful or not. When one amasses a cult with an intent to kill on your behalf to incite a race war, it's life without parole or even release. But allegedly killing one rich white healthcare CEO, and the AG immediately calls for the death penalty without even allowing for any sort of due process to take place first. When ideas can become illegal, the government maintains their right to deport or detain people based off of their views, dissent and terrorism is fully in the eye of the beholder. Punishing those who allegedly attempt to threaten the rich white ruling class is encouraged. However, any sort of justice for those who kill the innocent people of Gaza is swiftly swept under the rug. The death served to benefit the big money-making machine that America runs on, then congrats. It wasn't murder. It was just business as usual. The government says congrats, you get a pass to kill. Collect your get out of jail free card. It's good for an unlimited amount of uses as long as you kiss the ring. Don't you see? Rules are mere suggestions for those with enough money and influence to fight or intimidate their way into evading the consequences. The Trump admin has made it extremely clear that those that are for a free Palestine, those that want to see change in America at the alleged risk of their freedom, and those that believe in free speech, all things they are trying to claim are illegal ideas, are all considered to be dissenters and terrorists, whether they're citizens, residents, students, or immigrants. Mahmoud Khalil is just one example, but since his detainment, there have been many more such instances. Just this week, Sam Beard, Stop Cop City activist and spokesperson for LM's official legal fund, which I have also linked in the description of this video, was visited by FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. It is clear that the government is utilizing this task force and whatever other resources they can mobilize to intimidate those who they deem dissenters, even just those that dissent with their use of free speech or protest. They have even blatantly stated that they're looking for ways to legally deport citizens. I can't help but wonder, how will they operate when the fine line between dissenting and exercising one's own constitutional rights becomes more and more blurred? Will those that believe in the Constitution, even those that voted for the current administration, be labeled terrorists for attempting to uphold our fundamental rights? The Trump admin's fight to dismantle due process is a grotesque attack on our democracy and a danger to us all. Which pillar of democracy will they attempt to dismantle next? And which will it take to finally mobilize us? Thank you for listening.